Ever since I can remember, my mother was never an easy woman. She was the kind of mother who loved the only way she knew how, which more often than not wasn't the way we needed. Harsh, controlling, extremely religious, full of quirks. But she was my mother. I grew up in a house where silence was the rule, and affection was a reward. If I got a good grade, she'd say it was my duty. If I got sick, she'd say it was God's punishment for sneaking sweets. And if I cried, she'd tell me to swallow my tears before anyone saw me. My siblings, Felipe and Carla, left home as soon as they could. He moved abroad, made money, and vanished from the family's life. She married a much older man and ran, off to a rich neighborhood where no one knew her as Antonia's daughter, that weird seamstress from the village. I stayed. I stayed because I always carried a deep-rooted guilt I couldn't explain. Maybe because I was the youngest. Maybe because I was the one who heard "you weren't planned" the most. Maybe because I'd tried to make a life elsewhere and failed. I was the daughter who came back, the one who lived 3 blocks from Mom's house, the one who brought grocery bags, the one who showed up at the ER whenever she said her chest hurt. And it was on one of those visits that, for the first time, I noticed something was off. She called me Marinalva, the name of the neighbor who lived 2 houses down. We laughed it off at the time. I said, "Are you losing it, Mom?" And she replied dryly, "Better crazy than useless like you," but I saw it. I saw the blank look in her eyes. A fleeting moment of emptiness. The kind of emptiness that scares you. The following months were a mix of forgetfulness and aggression. She began repeating questions, mixing up the days, wandering the street in her nightgown. One time, she burned rice until it turned to charcoal and swore she had eaten it all. I did what any desperate daughter would do. I sought doctors, tests, referrals, diagnosis, early-stage Alzheimer's. My mother cried once. Just once. She said she didn't want to be a burden. And then, that same day, accused me of wanting to institutionalize her to steal her house. From then on, it was a steep descent. I stopped working full-time. Started tutoring in the evenings, when my neighbor, Dona Lucia, could stay with her. Mornings and afternoons, it was just me and her. I remember thinking, it'll get better, the medication will help, but it didn't. Alzheimer's is a silent thief. It steals the person while they're still breathing. She started calling me the girl from the shelter. Then, neighbor. One night she woke up screaming, thinking someone was trying to kill her. It was me, trying to cover her with a blanket. Felipe and Carla knew. I sent messages. I called. I did video calls with her while she could still carry a conversation. They seemed sympathetic, but distant. Generic phrases like, "hang in there," "we'll talk later," and "I'll come visit soon." That soon never came. On her birthdays, they sent flowers. On religious holidays, they'd call for 2 minutes and talk to her like she was a child. When they realized she no longer recognized their voices, they started sending voice notes, and eventually stopped even that. I took on everything, from bathing to adult diapers, from crises to appointments with geriatricians, psychologists, and neurologists. I spent all my savings, sold my car, maxed out my credit cards, negotiated with the health insurance company, and I kept going, because she was my mother. Even if she no longer knew who I was. The house she lived in was hers. Paid off. Small, old, with cold tile floors and a musty closet smell. But it was where I grew up. Where I ate bread with margarine while watching TV Colosso. Where I got spanked for writing "butt" on the wall. Where I cried in secret after getting dumped by my first school crush. Caring for her in that space was painful, but it made sense. I started adapting the rooms, removed rugs, installed grab bars in the bathroom, set up discrete cameras with motion sensors so I could sleep in peace. It was an exhausting life. I barely slept, ate whatever I could, felt emotionally drained. But there was something almost sacred about that routine, a kind of silent reparation. I wasn't the perfect daughter, but I was there. 2 years passed. 2 years in which Felipe never came to Brazil. 2 years in which Carla made up excuses. The husband's sick. The kids have colds. The pandemic's bad. Always a reason. Mom no longer spoke in full sentences, but sometimes she'd look at me and smile. A childish, crooked, odd smile, as if she were seeing some kind of light. I clung to those moments like a drowning person clings to a life ring. And it was on an ordinary day, a hot Saturday, while I was changing her diaper and softly singing O Leãozinho, that the doorbell rang. Felipe, wearing an expensive polo shirt, rolling suitcase, and the air of someone doing the world a favor. Behind him, Carla, in a beige linen blouse, light makeup, and that calculating stare. "We came to see Mom," she said. I almost asked, "Which mom?" The visit lasted 40 minutes. They took pictures, talked to her like she was a broken porcelain doll. When she didn't respond, they said, "Alzheimer's really is such a cruel disease." I smiled out of politeness. But inside, I was boiling. On their way out, Felipe pulled me aside. "We need to talk about what's going to happen with the house afterward." I frowned. "After what?" He sighed, with that smug look of someone who thinks they're very clever. "You know this comes at a cost, and she won't last much longer. We need to be rational." Carla chimed in, with that sweet and poisonous voice. "It's not fair for one person to get everything. The house is a family asset. And you're living here, right?" I laughed. A dry, bitter laugh. Dying to scream. "I'm not living here. I'm taking care of her. For 2 years. I cook, clean, feed, bathe her. While you two are posting pictures in restaurants, I'm here cleaning up shit. But of course, now that you smell death, you show up." They didn't like that. And I didn't care. A week later, I received a letter. A lawyer. Felipe and Carla were requesting property mediation, claiming I was enjoying a shared asset without permission, saying the house was a future inheritance and I was blocking legitimate access to the property. I threw up when I read it. Literally. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried like a child, not out of fear of the law, but from tasting the bitter flavor of injustice. My mother was alive, breathing in the room next door, eating porridge and watching cartoons, and they were already fighting over cement. I reached out to a lawyer friend, who confirmed what I already feared. Without a will, everything would be equally divided among the children, even though I was the only one who took care of her, even though I spent money I didn't have, even though I was left alone, forgotten, while they traveled the world. You can contest it, claim adverse possession, or file for reimbursement of caregiving expenses, he said. But brace yourself. It's going to get ugly, and it'll take a long time. I took a deep breath. I looked at my mother, sleeping with her mouth slightly open, her eyes half closed, as if still dreaming of things she no longer remembered. And I thought, is it worth it? Is it worth fighting for a house that became a battleground? Is it worth getting hurt even more for something that only brought me pain? But a part of me screamed, yes. Because it wasn't just for me. It was for her. For everything she had been, with all her flaws and hardness. For everything I endured in silence. For every dawn spent cleaning vomit. For every time she called me good girl without knowing who I was. I wasn't going down without a fight, but I also didn't know the worst was yet to come. If I said I thought about giving up, I'd be lying. But if I said I held up without breaking, I'd be lying too. After the letter from my sibling's lawyer came long gray days. Taking care of my mother started to feel different. It wasn't just physical exhaustion anymore. It was the mental strain of feeling like my presence there was a mistake a court needed to correct. Like my existence in the house I grew up in was on trial. Felipe went back abroad just days after his whirlwind visit. Carla stayed in town a little longer, occasionally showing up with a carefully curated look of martyrdom. One time, she brought a carrot cake and wanted to take a picture with our mom to post online with the caption, "A love beyond measure." I swallowed hard. The next day, I found the whole cake in the trash. My mother hadn't even recognized what it was. They started calling me the caretaker. In the family group chat, which had been silent for years, passive-aggressive messages started to appear. It's beautiful to care, but caring with fairness is even better. Everyone has their role, but everyone has rights too. When love gets mixed up with self-interest, that's when the confusion starts. These messages were from cousins, distant uncles, people who barely knew my mom was still alive, but who now seemed to feel a sudden urge to defend Felipe and Carla. The final straw came when a cousin commented in the group, "Some people care because of the house, not out of love. That makes me sad." That day, I wrote, "If anyone wants to clean feces at 3 a.m. out of love, I'm accepting volunteers," and left the group. The legal process began. Yes, they actually filed for an early inheritance proceeding, claiming asset risk. My lawyer explained that it was unusual, but possible, if heirs argued that the property might be diminished. They claimed I was living in the property without paying rent to the other co-owners. Co-owners of a living woman. It was surreal. A few days later, Carla showed up at my door. "Can I come in?" I almost said no, but I let her in. She looked thin, worn out, dressed far too elegantly for a casual visit. She scanned the house with discomfort, as if the air was heavier now. I came to apologize. I raised an eyebrow. "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't want the house, but I wanted to explain something." I sat on the couch, silent. When Mom got sick, I ran, because I had already taken care of her for too long. When you were a teenager and locked yourself in your room, I was the one who heard her scream in the middle of the night. I was the one who cleaned her vomit during her episodes. When you left home, I was still here, until I could finally leave too. And when she got worse, I just couldn't come back. She took a deep breath. "But you stayed, and I envy you for that." That admission disarmed me. Carla wasn't evil. She was fragile and cowardly. Like Felipe, who only dealt with practical things. I was the only one who stayed, and maybe that's exactly why I was the only one she felt she could either use or love. Carla left quietly. She didn't ask for the house. She didn't ask for money. She only asked to visit our mother's grave with me someday. I told her I'd think about it. And then came the plot twist. A few weeks later, Felipe sent me a message with a PDF attached. It said, "I thought you should see this before you decide what to do with the house." The document was a DNA test. Felipe found out he wasn't our father's son. He had taken the test on his own, out of curiosity, after a genetic issue made him question our family origins. The results didn't match our father's records. Felipe was the son of another man, a neighbor from our mother's youth, he speculated. I was always his favorite, and now I get why. He was overcompensating. I didn't know what to say. Felipe went on, "I'm not contesting anything. I just wanted to say I understand why Mom left the house to you. Maybe you were the only right thing she ever managed to build." Then he hung up. I was in shock. The child she rejected the most was, in fact, the only legitimate child of her husband. And the one most loved by the father wasn't even his. Pure life irony. The masks of a family built on secrets finally fell. With the house in my name, I decided not to sell it. Quite the opposite. I renovated it. I kept my mother's room as a memorial, with a small shelf where I placed the blue scarf, her marked-up Bible, and the letter she wrote me. I went back to studying psychology, a long-lost passion from my youth. I built a support network for women who care for relatives with Alzheimer's by themselves. I gave talks. I helped other invisible daughters recognize themselves. And little by little, I began to live. One morning, I went to my mother's grave. I brought white flowers. In the plot next to hers, I noticed there were flowers too, and a photo glued to the stone. It was the neighbor from her youth. Felipe probably already knew where to look for the roots that had always confused him. And me? I looked at my mother's headstone and said, I cared, even without having received. But now I understand. You did the best you could with the little you had. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acceptance. In the end, the inheritance she left wasn't the house. It was the truth. It was the freedom to be who I am without needing to prove anything to anyone. And above all, it was the certainty that some roots survive, even in the driest soil.